Good morning, Opening Pathways viewers, or whatever time it is where you are. Today I have Vidar Hokstad with me, and he is a fractional CTO and the founder at Hokstad Consulting. Vidar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. To get started, I'd love for you to share with the viewers a little bit about yourself, your company, and what got you on this journey.
Sure. I'm Norwegian originally. I started out in Norway. I started a company when I was 19 at university and was basically overconfident about what we were able to do. We had no business experience, basically. So that put me on the journey. And where I'm at now is basically that I've gone from startup to startup basically through my career, and with occasional detours into consulting. And um, I'm basically trying to give people advice on the basis of all of that experience. And especially because I enjoy working with startups in the kind of environment where I'm still allowed to be hands-on. Whereas if I were to stay in a company, you reach a certain level of seniority and you're not allowed to touch the code anymore.
Yeah, that startup life, sometimes for some of us, it gets in our blood and we can't let go of it. I know I've loved talking with people over the years and seeing how it happens when there are certain people that love that beginning phase who are not going to be around later, just as there are people who are not going to join that beginning phase but are anxious to when it matures a little bit. And with the startup situation that we have, there's never a shortage depending on where you want to be. So
Yeah.
tell me a little, I think that um, I find that people who have evolved into who they are today, someone in their past when they were younger, either inspired their journey or was some sort of mentor when they were young. Who was that for you?
Well, I mean, my dad. I started programming when I was around 5, and it was because my dad brought home a VIC-20 back in 1980-ish. And the nice thing with the VIC-20 was that it had few characters on screen, so which meant that I was able to read what was going on there when he was programming from the couch. I could was looking over at the other side of the room. I was very curious. And very specifically, actually, at one point, I had started writing basic keywords on a sheet of paper and like trying, writing programs on paper. I had no idea what they were doing, but my dad noticed and, put me in front of the machine instead and showed me a few things. And that's basically all got me started programming.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So
yeah,
I went
interesting.
through like years of calling my parents at work to tell them that I've done something new on the computer. And
Yeah, I love that you got introduced to it as a kid because as kids, I think we're like little sponges. We can just absorb it. Later on, it's harder to get it in your head, right? So, tell me this. Did you take any personal risks in doing the work you're doing that people don't even know about? Something you had to do that kind of behind the scenes?
So I would say I never really felt like you're taking much personal risk, but in a startup, obviously, at any time you're risking your job, your career. You never know what's going to happen. We have been there've been certainly been moments where things were a lot dicier than people involved might have known. For example, one startup I did, the one that I moved over to the UK with, where at one point we were within like 5 days of being out of money, and people were aware that things were, dicey, and we were really struggling to get the next round of investments. But most people weren't aware that we were literally days away from not being able
Yeah.
to make payroll. And I had no fallback plan at that point. But at the same time, it didn't feel very risky because at that point I'd already been through a couple of, cases where I think didn't work out, and I realized that it wasn't the end of the world, basically.
Yeah, I think those run out of money situations are more common than people realize, and a lot of people don't even know it's happening. I know I was with a startup one time and I think Microsoft was trying to buy us, and their due diligence time and our runway didn't match. And I ended up laying off the entire company. on my birthday, which was a birthday to remember for sure. Have you ever doubted your vision?
All the time, all the time. I feel like one of my lessons from doing startups is that it's important to try to avoid overthinking, because sometimes that doubt is good. You need to have a certain amount of doubt to not, be delusional about your chances. But it's very easy to sort of end up paralyzing yourself with all of these what ifs, and just not try something because it feels like it shouldn't work. So yeah, lots of doubts.
Yes, yes. How about a belief or an assumption that you might have had that just turned out to be completely wrong?
Well, I mean, I worked at an early tablet once, and very quickly, as a result actually of that, of seeing that not gain the traction we were hoping for, gained belief that that was because the entire concept just wasn't resonating with users and not because the hardware was crap. And we were too early, basically. And there was a whole field around us that were too early and they were doing similar things. So we were not like unique. Meanwhile, Apple was waiting and just waiting for the hardware to mature, and figuring out how to do it right. So when the iPhone was launched, I was completely dismissive. I was like, we've tried this. There's been smartphones. There's been tablets. This wasn't anything new for us. And so I held on to old school Nokia, a smartphone of sorts, for years, because I was like, well, this is never going to
Yeah,
amount to anything.
yeah, I love it. I saved some of the early trios from my time at Palm, and I remember I was traveling internationally and I needed a backup phone, and I thought I'm going to fire this thing up and see what happens. And it worked. I was amazed that it still would function. And it's interesting how far we've gotten. And then I realized how simple it was to use back then, compared to what we have today of the evolution of things. So. I'm curious, if somebody was watching you from back in your earlier days on this journey, what would surprise them most about Vidar today?
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I think when I started, I'm incredibly introvert by nature, and I might often not come across that way now. But I was really much, really the stereotypical introverted geek who avoided eye contact and in general was, not likely to be speaking up very much. Though that was kind of like that. People who knew me well knew that that wasn't true, because once I started talking, I'm hard to shut up. But there was this whole thing, and I think people who worked with me more recently who didn't know me back then probably would be surprised at seeing the difference there. And that's basically a lot of concerted effort and working in places where I had to focus on the people side of things, and all of that is learned for me because it does not come naturally at all.
Yes, I love this whole introvert extrovert. I'm an introvert myself, and I think it gets mislabeled a lot because people don't really understand the true meaning of the two words. But I bake it down to something pretty basic. I think that an introvert needs to prime the pump. The extrovert, the pump is already full and ready to go.
Mm.
And but once they're both ready to go, they have equal contributions. So I don't know about anybody scientific what they think about that, but that's what I've learned along the way. So
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
yeah, tell me this, if you could go back to day one of this journey, what would you do different, or would you do everything the same?
Oh, there's so many things, so many things. I mean, going all the way back to my first company, the first thing we did was that we spent too much capital on things we could have leased or rented, or avoided using at all. So that was simple stuff like we spent a significant amount of our money buying routers and servers for infrastructure, because we were setting up an ISP and we thought we needed to. But I realized later we could have leased all of the equipment we needed and deferred our capital needs quite significantly. But again, had no idea about business. I was 19, and the computer science bit was the bit I was interested in. And there's been other things like that. Actually, another one from my very first company was that we started a price war with an large incumbent telco because we did not understand that the reason they had priced it the way they did was not because they couldn't go lower, but because that they wanted to milk the profits available in what was at the time a very small market. So we started a price war, and it took 3 days, and then they lowered the prices to where we were, and nobody made any money in that dial-up internet market for the next 3 years.
Interesting, interesting. I love these stories. So tell me something. What did the early days of your journey teach you about trust?
Oh, it's been quite a few interesting stories there too, as well. And I think, yeah, I'm generally a quite trusting person. And again, actually, all the way back to the first company I joined in, that we did a lot on trust. There's a lot of things we didn't write contracts for because, hey, who needs them? It's kind of like, well, we knew the people we were making a deal with and kind of thing. And that's one of the things we learned pretty quickly was that it's all well and great to not have everything in writing when everybody is happy.
Isn't
You
that
know, you can trust everybody when everybody's happy because nobody's going to rock the boat then. But you need to have everything in writing for the times when that trust breaks down. And that was that took time to get used to because I don't like the paperwork. I don't like that, having to dot my I's and that kind of thing. It's annoying. But then you find out that it's a lot easier to continue trusting somebody as well when you know that if the trust should break down, you are still protected.
Yes, yes. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and they were questioning, in our coaching academy, the need for contracts when you're entering with coachings with somebody. And I think that sort of line of demarcation happens once you start accepting money, once there's, money or whatever resource it is that's exchanged. That's where this clarity needs to happen. Probably before, but especially at that point, because then it becomes more than just we're having a conversation or exploring something. We're actually exchanging part of our treasure, if you will, that when we don't get what we want or perceive that we don't get what we want, I like what you said, to have something to protect you. So, I'm curious how you approach this with people. I often talk to um, tech founders and CEOs that have got big budgets, and we are living in this time of technology just racing forward, although I happen to believe it always has been. And the new time of AI and people's reluctance, as well as people that are the other end diving in with both feet, probably sometimes not even thinking about what they're doing. I know I read an article the other day about people were embracing AI and demanding it in their business without really having a strategy of why, but they just need to be able to say they're using AI. But I'm interested in knowing what you think about where we need to invest in these new bold technologies at the same time be conscious of sustainability, basically, exploring the new while keeping the lights on. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
it's a great question, and it's actually one of the areas that I'm doing consulting in now because I love using these tools. I use, Cloud Code every day. I have it running in, multiple sessions. There's a client I'm working with now where I'm using it extensively, and it's great. But it's very easy to sort of rush into it in a way where you are creating as many problems as you're solving because you end up using them to generate enormous amount of code, for example, but you're not using them to improve the quality of that code or improving the quality of the code you're already writing manually, for that matter. And there's also a lot of lacking knowledge around the security aspects of it. And it's not just sending all your data to the AI model provider. It's when people start hooking up third-party tools, building agents, and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of need for people to sort of not necessarily put things on pause, but to at least allocate time and resources to figuring out a coherent strategy around how they're going to use these tools and how they're going to build it out, and how they're going to make sure that their agent won't readily hand out their other customers' data just because somebody asks nicely, or
Yeah.
is it is convincing a support ticket.
Yeah, there's more to it than just saying I have AI. The question really becomes you invested in AI, is it working? What have you done with it? Not just can you say you have AI, but
Exactly. Is it working, and is it working in a way that's sustainable as well? Because I have people who are achieving like great work in terms of getting code that appears to be working, and it might be working for the original use case, but unless they have like proper processes to make sure that the quality is good under the hood as well, you're building sandcastles that look great on the outside, and then somebody is undercutting. You're trying to make a change, and suddenly it all falls apart. But also, I mean, the security risks. There's been lots of examples of security risks that are just of classes people don't expect. And I think the simplest illustration there is with the kind of support ticket thing. Because if you are building, say, an agent to handle your support tickets, we know that if there's going to be a human agent on the other side, we need to tell that human that, okay, here are the security rules. You're not going to hand out data to somebody without like this field that indicates who they're actually logged in as matching the data you're looking up, right? You might even prevent them from seeing data for accounts other than the one that has made the request. But if you're then putting an AI agent there, people are used to software, not acting based on judgment calls. So you'd assume that, oh yeah, you can just tell it that, hey, you're going to be returning data for the user that the request is from. But the new thing we have to contend with now is that you can convince the software, right? You can tell the software a sub-story about why you can't be logged in as the right user account, and it might believe you. And so you need to protect yourself by making sure that in that given context, that agent doesn't actually have access to data other than for the account it was logged in as. But it's very easy to just give it all the access and assume that the agent will know what it should be doing.
I'm glad we're having this conversation. Somebody has convinced me that they need to give me a demo, a friend actually, who has somebody giving me a demo for, they've deployed a kind of a bot of themselves to help with many tasks they're doing, and have told me, you just really need to see this, Tom. And you brought up something good that I probably wouldn't have thought to ask about this, which is security. So I'm glad we had this conversation, because that will definitely be on my list of questions of, how do I know that if I'm looking at this, that it's secure and that I'm actually talking to the real people, or what's going on behind the scenes, which I can do that with my own human judgment today. Maybe faulty occasionally, but I try not to be. But how do I guarantee that when something's representing me, which is interesting. So I like that. Tell me this, Vidar, how do you know when to pivot or push through?
That's always a tricky one. I have my favorite pet peeve in that respect actually was a company that I moved to the UK with, which was a venture funded vanity email service originally. And we ended up pivoting to do the .name top-level domain. And I'm still mildly resentful that we ended up selling off that original email service, because the buyer, managed to recover the purchase amount in 6 months. And after that, it was like pure profit. But we were convinced and actually outvoted by the VCs at the time who wanted to focus solely on the .name top-level domain. And in retrospect, it was not a great decision. So I would say, at that point, I I was pushing for holding on to the original service. But I will say, I mean, it's not that I was convinced that on name wouldn't work, because I absolutely supported pushing that as well. I just thought that it wasn't a sure enough thing that we should get rid of the other thing we were doing. But it's also, it's so easy to get it wrong as well. I've been working on startups where we've held on basically until, in one case, I was bootstrapping a GIS document management startup, and we had a couple of customers. And my partner in that project, for example, also was like uh, pushing on, trying to sell more, wasn't getting very far, but we let it just keep going for several years more than we should have. So that wasn't, that was my full time, my day job at the time. So it was easy to let it just trundle and go and eat away at my spare time instead. In retrospect, we should have let it go much earlier, and we should have seen that the takeoff wasn't. We got the occasional customer, but the rate of new customers wasn't increasing, and potential failure wasn't there.
I'm curious to know. I found that some of the bigger mistakes we make lead to some of our big successes. Have you ever had one of those?
I think, in a way, in a sense that I come away from every startup I've done learning new things that have been very helpful, as well as making connections that have been helpful. So, I mean, I can chart almost all of my companies have involved somebody somebody I've known from my past, one way or the other, whether I've been one of the co-founders or an early hire, or in some cases, people who have worked for one of the startups I co-founded have ended up hiring me to another startup. So, I mean, that happened with the company, the vanity email provider I mentioned, for example. When we pivoted to .name, our legal counsel was Mike Arrington, who started TechCrunch. And he ended up hiring me for a subsequent startup he did actually at the same time as he started TechCrunch. Unfortunately, TechCrunch was what took off, and the one that I joined did not.
It did not.
But the interesting thing there is that his co-founder hired me again for another startup of sorts, an VC firm fund that was trying to do some quite interesting things a few years back. So it's yet another, example of somebody I knew brought me into that startup, and I got to know somebody who has brought me into another one later.
Interesting, interesting. I love this. So tell me this. How do you move through times of burnout or moments of uncertainty? What do you do with those? Because I think we all have them, and we all manage that differently and react to it differently. How does Vidar handle that?
A little bit, but it varies. I would say a good example was actually after this .name experience, where we ran headlong into the .com crash, and we had to make the funding we got right before, like a few weeks before the crash. That was meant to last a few months, and we had to make it last for like 3-4 years. And at the end of that, it had been absolutely exhausting. We had pivoted, we had tried everything. We had to fire a lot of people, and I just, I wanted out. And what I ended up doing was taking a job at Yahoo. It was like, at the time it was 10,000 people. I was a small cog in the machine. I was only needed to deal with my team. It was a nice place to work. And much calmer. I spent 3 years in like minor inter-office skirmishes over billing and protecting my team from having to deal with that. And it was fine. It was a nice break, basically. So I would say, go take a job at a big company.
Yes,
It
yes.
is nothing like a startup when it comes to stress levels.
It's interesting when you bring that up of people have asked me over time. I've worked for many a startup and I've worked for some of the largest companies in the world. And people will ask me, Tom, which was your favorite? And my answer is yes, because I got so much from each one, and I look back on it and made decisions that I were what seemed really risky, and even at times may have been a mistake. But in retrospect, I learned so much from each of those that has served me well throughout my career. So, with these things that we perceive that may not be the best at the time, we find out later that maybe we learned something we didn't expect to learn from it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I learned lots from the Yahoo job as well. It was just not a under a high stress
Yes, yeah,
situation. So it was a great place actually to sort of take a step back and get my management understanding, formalized. Actually get sent on courses that would never happen in a startup environment because you're all too busy doing other stuff, and really sort of pick up on the soft skills and brushing off a lot of hard edges from my previous startup years. So in that sense, it was very helpful to sort of bring along for the future. And big companies do all those kinds of things much better. You're in an environment that's certainly a lot more pleasant to work in. They have actual functioning HR department, which one of my previous startups had gotten to a size where it started to acquire one. But in general, all of the niceties which comes with having actual division of labor instead of everybody doing everything.
yes, 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 yeah. I was talking to a client the other day, and they're getting rather large, and the CEO has a mindset of we don't need HR and or a people department. And it was a fun conversation teasing out why and where that was coming from and what their previous experiences had been to lead them into this situation where they were so fixated on it. At the same time, they're having a number of issues in the company that would resolve, or the right person in it would resolve, and how we bring these things that happen to us and get really planted in of what we are and aren't going to do without opening our blinders up and realize everything isn't just how the experience you had the first time, that there are other ways that things happen that you don't have to repeat it, and bringing that along with them, and even setting themselves up for some real troubles ahead
Yeah.
because they're not focused on it.
I mean, it's a very typical thing I see in tech circles as well, that we do have a tendency to think that we can do everything better.
Yes,
we
yes.
can we can automate away half your job, kind of thing. But then again, most people don't have the domain experience to know what they're actually doing in that respect. I've seen so much horrible hiring done by people with the tech experience who think that
Yes.
they understand the entire the hiring process.
Yeah, I've had a number of those conversations, and I'm sure you'll identify with it over the build versus buy of technology in running large customer service centers of, well, we can build that for you. And yeah, but I'd rather you build something else for me. This is already ready to go for exactly what I need. But those are
Yeah.
interesting conversations that I love to have with technology people. Tell me this.
It's a tricky one as well, because sometimes we are not good enough at explaining why it is right to build in certain
Yeah.
circumstances. I've been in cases where I've been working on platforms where my mind is racing about 10 steps ahead of what we're building in terms of I know where it's heading, but I might not have been clear enough about actually putting across that vision to people to make them understand why I'm not building the thing that they're trying to buy now. I'm building something that is actually doing a whole lot of other things.
Exactly. One of my big lessons along that journey of build versus buy was the word integration. And exactly what you're saying of what we're looking at in the future and how it's going to play or not play with our technology vision. And so it was always good to experience that, and always a fun conversation. Tell me this, Vidar, what impact are you most proud of? Not professionally or publicly, but personally.
There's one actual one event that sort of stands out to me. That's like one of the most satisfying ones, and it was very much not. It was in a job, but it was not. It was not part of my sort of normal work. We had somebody, and I'll be vague because I don't want to give them away, but we had somebody on my team at one of my positions who had a family member who got seriously ill. And he basically came to me and was ready to hand in his notice because he needed to go be with them. And, you know, I got him, I went straight to HR and said, you know, what can we do? This was long before working from home was regularly a thing. And he needed to go to a different country. And, you know, we got it approved. And so he was able to be with this person and stayed with the company for another 10 years.
Amazing,
Basically.
right? Amazing.
And that felt, you know, I mean, it felt amazing at the time to know that I've been able to let him, you know, to give him the ability to hold on to his job, which he needed more than ever at that point. But also at the same time that I could see the effects even years later when I could see that he was still there.
Yes, yeah. It builds loyalty and demonstrates that we care about people, not just the business. I like it. I like it. Have you ever said no to growth because it wasn't aligned with yourself and what you believe in?
Yes. We had, you know, I've been in conversation actually when I was running when we were running this vanity email provider. We had various conversations with potential partners that would have given us a lot of revenue, but that basically meant we would have become a haven for spammers. And it was, you know, you're when you're there and you're seeing the runway shortening and shortening, it is very tempting. It's very tempting to sort of make excuses or yeah, this isn't really spam. This is, you know, it's, you know, you're willing to rationalize quite a lot of gray areas when you get to those situations. So it's very satisfying to know that I would say that I've always made choices that are perfect in that respect, but I've certainly avoided the worst ones.
Yes, yes. What are the top values that Vidar lives by day to day in how you work?
Well, you know, I want to make a difference in the jobs that I do for people. It's kind of hard to encompass everything, but I think, you know, having integrity around what I'm delivering and making sure that I can stand by it, not just vis-a-vis my customers, but also vis-a-vis like society at large. There are certain types of companies that I wouldn't work for that reason, for example. And sometimes, you know, especially when you're running a small consultancy, it's a tricky balancing act because you can't afford to say no to everything. But being able, luckily, I'm in a situation where I can be quite picky. So
Interesting, interesting. So tell me, what opportunity is going on right now for Vidar that's pulling you forward, that's got you excited?
I keep ending up with these sort of three pillars, I guess, in terms of what I'm doing now. Two maybe, depending on how you slice and dice it. The one is DevOps, because I've done so many startups. There's a lot of things I want to do in the DevOps space. My favorite pet peeve there being finding ways of getting people to understand just how large Amazon Web Services margins are, and chip away at the cloud costs. And that is like you know, I make money off it when I do it for clients, but it incenses me that the margins are as they are in that space. The other part is on the development side. I like talking about and working with you know, development technologies, and that now means AI. So hence two or three, depending on whether you count the AI as an entirely separate thing or as part of the software development. So I'm kind of sort of schizophrenic in that way, that I have found it that I don't want to super narrowly focus on one of those. DevOps stuff is plastered all over my website. At the moment, AI might be a few weeks down the line. But we are offering services across that because I like working in all of those in those different areas and find ways for crossover as well. So I'm currently working on an app server, for example, that we'll be using for some of our DevOps clients. Not planning on offering for sale externally yet, but who knows? So I like to get my fingers in many different pies. That's also one of the reasons why I've kept going back and forth between startups and that kind of thing. Getting sort of too blinkered and working in a single area is not my thing.
Yes, yes. I know I'm one of those people. I either want to be creating or changing or building. Once it's in maintenance mode or once it's just cooking along, I'm not the person to be there anymore.
Yeah.
I get a little bored with it. And if we just want to keep it all the same.
Different skill sets as well. I mean, it's you need to be of a different mindset. You need to be of a mindset of saying no to a lot of things to keep things stable, rather than saying, "Oh yeah, sure, we can do that. We don't have users yet."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So tell me what shifts are going on in tech today that get you excited?
Well, I mean, it would be AI, and I think people aren't even seeing the contours of what that's going to be like in the long run yet. And also because people aren't most people aren't using the tooling that is more likely, in my mind, to resemble what they'll be dealing with. As in, most people are still using the web or Android and iOS clients for ChatGPT or Claude, for example. But whereas I increasingly use only Claude Code, and the reason for that is that 90% of the time when I'm working on something, I will basically end up setting aside a new directory, start up Claude Code, and have it write tools to help me do it. Even if it's not inherently, even if I'm not writing a piece of software, I might be working on a report, but I'll have it write tools to do data analysis. I'll have it write tools to gather the data I need, and those kinds of things. And I think most people aren't used to thinking in terms of, hey, I can will a tool into existence, and it doesn't need to be high quality because it only needs to work on the specific data I have in mind. The way people are putting together throwaway spreadsheets, right? That's the level of understanding it needs to get to, where people are throwing together applications as if they were a throwaway spreadsheet. And if you look back to, if you're old enough, I was a child when spreadsheets started spreading through offices, but still I've seen a lot of what it was like before to my parents, who both work jobs where they end up in a lot of contact with admin that are also often still happening on paper. And once you've seen that transition, it's very hard to imagine where we are going to go with AI, because we can see that the shift was so large then, and you can expect a larger shift now.
Wow. Yeah.
But the direction is hard to predict.
So tell me this. If that younger self, much younger self, were listening to this podcast, what would you tell him?
Oh, I would say, I think start working on the people aspect earlier, because as a child I was, as I mentioned, I was much more introverted. Well, the appearance was much more introverted because I hadn't found ways of working past that yet. And it's not like, ironically, I wouldn't have any things that I really wish to change in terms of the social part per se, but it would have helped me get to where I wanted to be quicker and easier, with less pain in terms of learning all of these things the hard way, if I had realized that I needed to address them sooner.
Very good. Very good. Vidar, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. You tell the viewers again about you, your company, and how they might find you.
Sure. So I'm relatively easy to find if you manage to spell my name, because my name is globally unique, basically. So I'm from Norway. There's like 2 families in Norway with my last name. So if you search for Vidar Hokstad, my company is hokstadconsulting.com, and it's basically a boutique consultancy. As I sort of mentioned, I don't really manage to focus on a single thing. We work across DevOps, software development, and as an extension of the software development, AI and AI strategy. So I say, especially if you're interested in advice on the DevOps side, or on how to produce an AI strategy for your company, look me up.
Wonderful. Thank you for being with me today, Vidar.
Thank you for having me.
And to my viewers, this is Tom Lenoble, and I'll see you next time.